For years now, I've been taking students through Lingua Latina by Hans Orberg, and at the end of each lesson, I require students to send Pensum C to me. They have to respond in Latin, they have to answer the questions in Latin. There's some common mistakes that come up in Chapter 1, Pensum C. Let's take a look. So one of the first troublesome questions is this one. Ubi sunt Syria et Arabia? And the question is, where are Syria and Arabia? In Latin, sunt is are, that's the verb. Quite often my students will respond to this question by saying Syria et Arabia in Asia est. Okay, here's the problem. Est means is. And if you're talking about Syria, which is the subject of the sentence, and Arabia, which is another subject of the sentence, it doesn't make sense to say Syria and Arabia is in Asia. That's bad grammar and that's bad English. Instead, you need to say Syria and Arabia, not est in Asia, but sunt. Syria et Arabia in Asia sunt, because sunt equals are. Now you're saying Syria and Arabia are in Asia, and this is much better grammatically, and it's also correct. Okay, another troublesome question for my students, and most of my students get this right, but they do email me and say, what does this word mean? Is this question, Estne Egyptus in Asia, and they're asking about this one right here. They get confused by estne. Est in Latin, as we've already said, means is. It can also mean he, she, or it is. It can also mean there is. The Romans had no question marks, and they only wrote in capital letters, and they ran all of their words together. They didn't space between them. This is, of course, I'm referring to inscriptions, but they did this on paper too, which means that if someone's reading along, they don't have a question mark to tell them that they're looking at a question. And for them to determine whether or not a word was or a sentence was a question, the Romans would actually place in E at the end of the first word in a sentence, and then that was usually the verb when it was a question. And this would tell the reader, I'm asking you a question. So when you see estne up here, it just means is with a question mark. That's it. So the question here is Egypt in Asia? And of course it's not. Egyptus in Africa est. Here's another one. Estne Britannia insula parva. There's that estne again. Is Britain a small island? Is it a small island? Now the most common answer to this question I get is Britannia insula magnus est. That's incorrect, and it's incorrect because magnus is a masculine adjective, but this adjective here, parva, is describing insula, and notice the endings. Insula ends with an A, parva ends with an A. This adjective here is describing this insula, Britannia, subject of the sentence, nominative case, est, that's the verb. What is it? It's a insula, that's a predicate nominative, and it's in the nominative case, but it has this adjective describing it. And the adjective is describing a word that is feminine, a word that ends with A. I'm overemphasizing this. Insula, which means that the adjective must also be feminine. Since this word is feminine, this word must also be feminine. This is how adjectives work in Latin. Since this word is nominative, this word, since insula is nominative, this adjective must also be nominative. And since insula is in the nominative case, did I already say that? Since it's nominative, gender numbering case. So since it's feminine, it's singular, that's what I'm looking for. Since we're only talking about one island, it's singular, the adjective must also be singular. For a while, for the first 10 chapters or so of Lingua Latina by Hans Orberg, which has got to be the greatest Latin book on the planet if you're teaching yourself Latin. Anyone who says differently, I believe, is selling something. It's just phenomenal. But for the first 10 chapters or so, the endings are going to match. Actually, it's all the way up until chapter 9 when third declension endings come in. Okay, I'm off course. Anyway, If insula is feminine, then the adjective has to be feminine. If insula is nominative, and it is, then the adjective must be nominative. If insula is singular, and it is, then the adjective must be singular. So insula magna. There's a bunch of things we could do. What if we were calling it, we were saying Britain was a long island? It would be Britannia insula longa est. Notice the ending. Longa is describing insula. Insula is feminine, so is longa. If Britain was a beautiful island, it is. I was born there, lived there for a long time. Britannia insula bella est. It's a beautiful island. Notice that bella ends with an A, longa ends with an A, magna ends with an A, parva, even though it's not technically describing Britain, ends with an A. Because insula is feminine and ends with an A, so does its adjectives. Now that does not always apply, but when you're dealing with first and second declension adjectives, it does. Alright, if you like this video, want to see more, want to learn more about Latin and Greek, then check out DwaneThomas.com, and of course subscribe below so that you get updates whenever I load new videos. Have a great day, guys.